As lawmakers move beyond opening day ceremonies, one theme is entering almost every policy debate, and that's affordability. From property taxes to housing and insurance, Republicans in the supermajority of the chamber are under pressure to address the rising cost of living for Floridians. The governor has called for significant cuts to non-school property taxes, even floating a constitutional amendment requiring voter approval. The House put forth a flurry of competing proposals, while Senate leaders have taken a more cautious approach, favoring a larger homestead exemption rather than a deep tax cut. Lawmakers are also weighing housing costs, including incentives for affordable units and relief for first-time homebuyers. And high insurance premiums continue to shape the cost of owning a home, keeping insurance reforms in the spotlight in this session. Mike, I'd like to start with you. You know, the fact is there were several alternatives that were offered up, and it seems that even within the political party of the Republicans, there are varying options, competing options. Which one of them do you think will get the most traction based on what you witnessed in Tallahassee this week?
Well, you're speaking to property taxes. Both the House and the governor support getting rid of the non-school property taxes.
Correct.
So there's an agreement there, but the House is also like, well, let's put other proposals, because we don't know if the Senate, for instance, is again showing a tremendous hesitancy to doing that. So they're throwing some other proposals to kind of offer options in the legislative process. It's not a bad idea, but DeSantis is criticizing the House for that approach, saying by throwing too much, you're going to distract from what is really necessary, and that's just getting rid of non-school property taxes.
Jake, would you say that one option in the property tax discussion is getting more support now, as we are now in Tallahassee? All of them are together talking about the different options. At one point, there were more than a dozen options.
Yeah, so, you know, the Florida Young Republicans have a legislative priority list. The number one priority that we put out was get rid of property taxes. It disproportionately affects young people. You know, this is under 40 years old, first-time home buyers. We are disproportionately affected versus people who have maybe equity in a home or multiple homes over so many years. And then, you know, there are proposals that are age specific, which I've personally come out, and the Young Republicans have come out that are only cutting for 65 plus. This kind of stuff pits Republicans against each other, whether it's by age, it pits people against each other. And this is all distracting from, well, let's get one single thing to the voters, because it's going to need to go to a constitutional amendment. And my hope in my conversations I've had with people in the Senate is that the Senate's going to come in and be the voice of reason, and kind of like we were talking about earlier, be the peacemakers and come up with like a single proposal, because I think if anything more than one thing gets on the ballot in November, it's just doomed to fail.
Jennifer, what would you say? I saw your face. You know, how are Democrats?
Well, how are you going to make up for the loss of those property taxes? Is my biggest question. Where is that income going to come from? It's a great talking point.
Well, but the supporters of this have said that so much of the tax base has increased as our property values have gone up, as so many more people have moved into the area, have moved into Florida after COVID, and so that municipalities and counties and cities have more income coming in terms of the value of property taxes that are being paid.
I would honestly counter on that, because how is that property tax money going to come back to the municipalities, back to the counties? Who's going to choose that? Who's going to determine which county gets what, rather than having home rule and governance closest to home, where you pick somebody that's representing you on your own town council to be able to manage these funds? Now we have it in the governor's hand or in the legislature's hand, and it's concerning to me. It is.
But Mitra, the whole point that the politicians on either side have focused on is creating more equitable access to owning your own home. Based on the studies that you have done and the statistics that the study has given, do you feel that property taxes realistically does create that equitable access for residents? Or to what degree does it create that?
Sure. So our housing equation report doesn't analyze access or equity specifically through property taxes. What it does show is that there's a clear gap between incomes and housing costs throughout Tampa Bay, regardless of worker, income types, et cetera. Some of those key drivers identified, show our limited housing supply, our rising rents, our rising home costs without wages, and there's too few options for the workforce. So when we talk about improving affordability, the strongest levers are increasing our supply, allowing our housing costs, and then changing some of our zoning and policy recommendations to help open up the spigot and open up the faucet.